Well, it's turned out nice again. Though that will undoubtedly prove problematic for this musical steps video of Stockton Heath as I walk south, shooting into the midday sun along the A49 from St Thomas's Church here on Old London Road first of all, and then onwards up the slight hill of London Road, passing the restaurants, cafes and bars along the Stocky Strip, until I reached the house George Formby Jr. lived in when he was a teenager between 1917 and 1924. Maybe I should have started this video by leaning on a lamppost at the corner of the street, in case a certain little lady comes by. Oh me, oh my. Anyway, I'll progress. Now, in this brief walk, I'll talk about the Formby family in general, so we appreciate how George Formby Jr. overcame his very hard background before taking his tentative steps to major stardom as a singer, music hall entertainer, and hugely successful film star. Even though George Formby Jr. became an international star during the war years, the Second World War, his father was highly regarded as a music hall entertainer too. So I'll talk about both father and son in relation to the house they lived in here in Stockton Heath for part of the first 2 decades of the 20th century. Despite particularly hard childhoods for Formby Sr. and Jr., George Formby Jr. became the highest paid UK star in the 1940s. Out of hardship necessity, George Formby Jr. came from a music hall entertainment family. George's father, George Formby Sr., moved his young family to Stockton Heath at the start of the 1900s, and it was from here that George Formby Jr. began his entertainment career. George Formby was the stage name for both father and son. George Formby Jr. was born George Hoy Booth in Wigan, around 12 miles north of here, on the 26th of May 1904. His father, Formby Sr., was born James Lawler Booth on the 4th of October 1875. He took the stage name Formby after the northwest coastal town found between Liverpool and Southport. Though he endured appalling circumstances, Formby Sr. became Lancashire's most famous musical star in the early part of the 20th century, with his type of comedy playing upon Lancashire stereotypes. He played a number of characters on stage. For one of them, he used the ironic nickname, the Wigan Nightingale, because of the way he would use his bronchial cough as a comedic device in his act. Formby Sr. was born into extreme poverty. His mother was an alcoholic and prostitute. His coal mining father was violent. Even though today Stockton Heath is regarded as quite an affluent village, this region of the UK was generally poor in the decades before the First World War. Today, Stockton Heath Village is designated as part of the county of Cheshire, as well as its larger town neighbour of Warrington. However, for a long time, Warrington was part of Lancashire, along with Wigan, the town Formby Sr. claimed was his birthplace for comedic effect. As a child to earn money, Formby Sr. would sing for pennies on street corners, before joining a singing duo in his teens. Now, probably out of financial necessity, he began to develop a solo act during the 1890s, so he didn't have to share the money with his duo partner. As a solo entertainer, he built up a good following around the Lancashire area. As his popularity increased, Formby Sr. also had a successful recording career, and made the transition from music hall to revue in around about 1916. However, though his health had always been poor, a 1916 stage accident weakened his lungs further. Formby Sr. suffered with tuberculosis and influenza for most of his life. He contracted influenza during the 1918 English pandemic. A century later, was suffering another pandemic. Anyway, ever resourceful, Formby Sr. used the horrendous cough brought on by his illness as part of his act. He created his own catchphrase, "It's not the cough that carries you off, it's the coffin they carries you off in." Much of Formby Sr.'s humour was based in his northwestern roots, particularly Wigan, which he told people was where he was born, rather than Ashton-under-Lyne. His son Formby Jr. was born in Wigan. It suited Formby Sr. to say he was from Wigan for comedic effect. He rightly realised he could create jokes about the Wigan area that would resonate, for different reasons, with northern and southern England audiences. In his act, Formby Sr. referred to taking holidays at Wigan Pier, which in reality was only a small wooden platform on the Leeds and Liverpool Canal for loading coal, rather than a pleasure pier. George Formby Sr. was born James Lawler Booth in Ashton-under-Lyne, Lancashire, on the 4th of October 1875. He was the illegitimate and only child of Sarah Jane Booth, a poor illiterate cotton weaver. His father, Francis Lawler, was a coal miner. 6 months after the birth of their son, Formby Sr., the couple married, both aged about 19. To supplement her inadequate and irregular income from cotton weaving, Sarah worked as a prostitute. She was a small woman, only around about 4 feet tall, and often sang in pubs for alcohol. She was frequently convicted for offences such as theft, prostitution, drunkenness and brawling. Consequently, because his mother Sarah was often absent from home, owing to being detained overnight at the police station, as a small child, Formby Sr. was frequently forced to sleep outside. Consequently, he developed asthma and bronchitis. As he got older, his poor health further weakened until he died in 1921 at Stockton Heath of pulmonary tuberculosis at the age of 45. The Manchester Guardian obituary called him Lancashire's accredited representative on the London variety stage, clown satirist of genius. Around 6 weeks after his father's death in Stockton Heath, George Formby Jr. took over his father's act, making his stage debut at 17 years of age. He initially copied his father's act, though he did appear with the name George Hoy, using his mother's maiden name, but soon took his father's stage name once he became more established. Incidentally, 10 years earlier, aged 7, George Formby Jr. had become an apprentice jockey, but he gained too much weight and consequently ruled out racing as a serious career. Formby Jr.'s fame increased during the war years when he made many popular films that saw him play the character of a foolish but lovable northerner. His ukulele-accompanied songs used double entendre lyrics delivered in an innocent fashion. Formby Jr. became the top British male star in box office takings between 1937 and 1943. Although his on-screen persona was that of a good-natured fool, in real life he was financially very shrewd. He amassed a fortune, earning up to £35,000 per film, and that was an extremely large amount of money in the 1940s. He never forgot his hard upbringing though. He rejected lucrative Hollywood offers so that he could entertain British and American troops during the Second World War, and as a result, he received an OBE in 1946. In his will, made a few days before he died, George Formby Jr. left most of his £140,000 fortune to his fiancée, Patricia Howson. He left nothing to his family, though this was contended by his family until an out-of-court settlement was reached after 6 years. So that's part of the story behind why this house, named Hillcrest, on Stockton Heath's London Road, has got a blue plaque indicating the Formby family lived here. Incidentally, George Harrison of the Beatles was a huge fan of George Formby Jr. and bought some of his ukuleles many years after Formby died of a heart attack in 1956. I wonder if that's also one of the reasons Harrison bought a bungalow in Appleton, just over a mile south of here, off London Road. You can watch my Musical Steps video about that bungalow too. After his death, George Formby Jr. was buried alongside his father in Warrington Cemetery, around a mile north from here.